Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I am the host. And joining me, as always, is my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
Football's back, baby. It's only 2 days of non-padded practice, but by golly, it's back. It's so nice to just be able to look at videos or the reports from the reporters and just like have some football and new photos and stuff. Especially when you're trying to write or come up with thumbnails. You're using all these old photos from the season. Now there's new photos, and like Herbert's looking swole, Harbaugh's looking happy. Mike Upati is at practice for some reason. So lots to get into today.
Yeah, it's a lot going on, obviously. Comparing the opening of training camp to a birthing experience was certainly not on my bingo card, but just classic Harbaugh in true Jim Harbaugh form. He almost got into a little tiff with the media, but he corrected himself. We got the calm, like, take it easy Jim Harbaugh too. So it was a great day. I'm super excited to get down there tomorrow. I'm not going to be at practice tomorrow, but I will be on Saturday with Alex. And then Tyler, Alex, and I will be at practice on Monday for the first day of pads. And hearing everybody today specifically be like, yeah, we really want to get pads on. I'm like, okay, like Monday is going to be lit. I cannot wait for Monday's practice.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to hear what a Harbaugh padded practice sounds like. Now, of course, they're backing off some intensity, right? We'll talk about that today as well. But I just want to hear that crack. What does it sound like at a Harbaugh practice when everyone's bigger and stronger after Ben Herbert in the offseason? What is it going to be like? All business, no music too, so you can really hear that crack. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I really hope that I'm going to be close to the offensive line, defensive line one-on-ones, because being able to hear the Khalil Mack, Joe Alt, and Joey Bosa, Rashawn Slater, Thule, all these guys, being able to hear those battles is just going to be so much fun. Usually they're like tucked away in the far corner and like nobody knows what's happening except for the beat reporters. I'm hoping that the way this regime has talked about offensive line and defensive line, that they're maybe a little bit closer towards the rest of the action. So should be a lot of fun. The no music thing, I'm curious to see how long that lasts. Music and football is such a tight-knit relationship, basically. It goes hand in hand. Like, I remember like lifting in high school and my freshman year of college, and it's like if there was no music on, people were just like on edge. And it's the same thing like at practice. And it doesn't have to be loud. It's just like kind of, you need music in the background. But we'll see what happens. It'll make it easier for us to know what is going on. Some people have mentioned like they've been able to hear play calls and hear Justin Herbert like audible at the line, which is super cool. But as a player, I would imagine that not having music is potentially going to get old in the near future. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm curious how they do that. Obviously, with padded practice, I wonder if they ever simulate crowd noise or noise in general, because rolling into week 1 against the Raiders, it will not be quiet. That's for sure, even with the offense on the field. But yeah, I'm for whatever works for them. It's at least a little bit different. Sets a different kind of tone. And maybe if players are for music truly, maybe it's an incentive for some reason or whatever, like, or a certain player gets to roll out the playlist if he has a great day. I don't know. Maybe the joint practices. I don't know if the joint practices are different. But
yeah,
if you've been to a practice, by the way, I know Frank is talking about, he's not a huge fan of the no music thing. But if you've been at practice, let us know, because I've heard so many great things from fans about practice. The intensity, everyone's locked in. It's all business. Derwin James is typically showing off his abs. And hey, dude, I would too. Wherever I'd show up to my wedding, if I had a 24-pack of abs, I'd show up with a crop top too. But he's all dressed down completely. I think the practices are so interesting now. And I've heard some comments like, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just practice. Like, oh, no music's not going to make a difference. But with the Chargers, with Jim Harbaugh, again, it goes back to day one when he basically, handshake deal with the Chargers, took a shot back and cleaned out the corners of the locker room. Every bit matters. So let me know what practice is like, and then I can't wait to be there up close and personal, if you will, on Monday.
Yeah, it's going to be a ton of fun. Jim Harbaugh is very well known for having obviously tough physical football teams, and everybody's been talking about that. Well, I mean, you have to establish that from the jump. And we would always hear about it, but I would never say the Chargers were like about being a physical team, but I think we're off to a good start so far. And we'll dive into some of the details today. If we have the time, and if you guys have questions, we'll try and touch on them as much as we can throughout the show. Obviously, this is training camp. It's a super exciting time for all of us. So if you have questions, feel free and fire away. Obviously, as always, the super chats will definitely get answered, and that is the easiest way to make sure you get featured on the show. Yeah. And yeah, as Elliot points out here in the chat, neither of us have ever met Alex Insdorf in person before. Tyler and I have met a few times. We've hung out at Newport Beach before. We've gone out to dinner with our wives before. Like I went to his wedding. I was in his wedding. We've met a few times, and neither of us have ever met Alex. And so we've obviously recorded together. We've written for Bolt Beat together. He's done Bolt breakdowns. Like we've had a group chat for 4 years together. But this is gonna be the first time meeting in person, so it's gonna be fun. Potentially a little bit awkward. There's just like some mannerism, things like that. You don't know, but it's gonna be a blast. We're gonna have a great time this weekend. Alex and I are gonna be staying up in the same hotel around training camp practice, so we are gonna be hanging out quite a bit this weekend. We figured we'd get as much time together as we could, so it should be a lot of fun. If you guys see us this weekend, make sure and say hello. And then Tyler will be joining us on Monday's practice for the first padded practice, like we said.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm glad you guys get to go and let me know what the Bolt's like and how this, that, and work. Because there's a lot I'm going to have to learn, not just being at the Bolt for the first time, but being on the field for the first time. That'll be like a whole whirlwind experience for me. So yeah, can't wait to meet Alex. I've known him longer than you, I believe, Stephen, by about a year, because he was running at Bolt Beat while I was a contributor there too. And then you got brought on. So I've known him for a very long time, and I can't wait to finally meet him. I'm sure he's relatively the same. He's also from Philly, Pennsylvania, East Coast. That's where my mom's side of the family is from. So I kind of get the whole deal. I know the Fly Eagles Fly song, so I think it'll be just fine. Like on a basic level, I get him.
Yeah,
already.
We're good. Yeah, we're all three very social, so it'll be good. And as Kevin points out in the chat, last year at the scrimmage, Kevin and his family sat behind us. We talked the whole time. So definitely we are not the kind of people that are gonna we're not too big for the crowd, right? Like we will say hello to you guys if you like. I'm the kind of person where I don't know if people want to like talk and like if they would rather just focus on the practice. So definitely come talk to us. We will be able to converse for sure. Say hello, have a good conversation. It should be fun. All right, so today we're going to dive into the first 2 days of training camp. No pads, and there's some tempo things that Jim Harbaugh is rolling through, but definitely some standouts already. And I think some people will say like, oh, it's just the first couple of days of training camp. Well, first impressions matter. We all know it, and you have to be able to come out and set the tone. And I think Derwin James and Justin Herbert both talked about that yesterday. So we'll talk about some things. In terms of the news and notes, just really quickly, Jim Harbaugh did confirm yesterday that Junior Colson, who was placed on the NFL illness list, non-football illness list, that is, had his appendix removed. So timeline is TBD. Jim Harbaugh setting the tone himself about injuries. I don't think we are ever going to get any real information about injuries and timelines from here on out, but that's okay. But I went and looked. Joe Burrow had his appendix removed, and he missed he missed 3 weeks of practice. So depending on when Junior Colson had his appendix removed, we could be looking at him missing the bulk of training camp, which unfortunately is not ideal. But I think obviously he still has the edge of knowing the defense and things like that. But yeah, injury and now the appendix, unfortunately, maybe slowing his rookie season start time just a bit for Junior Colson.
Yeah, it's strange. If you want to pick anyone to have appendicitis and surgery on it, I guess the good news, it's the person that knows the defense. Yeah. So Joe Burrow was 19 days from surgery to back to practice. Colson was placed on NFI on the 17th, so it could at least be 8 days since then. I have no idea when he had the surgery, but if it's the 17th, slightly before that, it's been a little over a week. So usually within a month you can return. I don't know how like that holds up in terms of football contact versus just regular return to and things like that. But hopefully he's back sooner than later. And with that comes the next sort of piece of news. And we had pushed Troy Dye as the third guy because he was the third guy in the rotation. This time with Colson out, it's been Henley in as that LB2. Perryman obviously as the constant. So Perryman's pretty much locked in as LB2 at this point. Not a surprise there anyway, considering they brought him in. But then, yes, it seems like Henley now, 2 days in a row, has been LB2. So unless things change, and honestly, it does make sense for the future, Henley is LB3 on the roster and 2 with Colson out.
Yeah, huge opportunity for Daiyan Henley. As long as Junior is out, I would imagine he's going to get the bulk of the first team reps at this point. So it's his time to distance himself. And I don't know if he can truly like cement himself as a starter as long as Junior is healthy. When that happens remains to be seen. But I think Daiyan certainly has a chance here to really carve out a role and be a potential starter for this team. Regarding Denzel Perryman, I think we've kind of speculated really like how, I don't want to say long his leash is, because he is like, I feel like he's going to be a starter throughout the season. But Albert Breer was at training camp yesterday for the Chargers and had a wonderful article up on Sports Illustrated. And one of the things he mentioned was like the core leaders of this football team, and Denzel Perryman was mentioned in that group. Like this team really seems to be rallying around Denzel as a leader. Obviously, Derwin James, Alohi Gilman, we know that they're going to be leaders. We know that Clomac and Joey are going to be leaders in their own ways. But it sounds like this team really is going to rally around Denzel Perryman. He's going to be a starter. He's going to be a leader. Based off of the way they're talking about him internally, I feel like he is probably going to be a captain. So, it's so interesting. Like, we know who Denzel Perryman is, and we know what he was when he left the Chargers. And now it's like he's coming back here with a much higher status. And so it's just going to be interesting, as those of us who, watched him be, the third string linebacker his last season with the Chargers, goes to the Raiders, becomes a Pro Bowl player, goes to the Texans, kind of as like a, borderline LB2, LB3 for that team. And now he's like unquestioned LB1, potentially a captain. So it's cool to see that second phase for Denzel Perryman.
Yeah, it really is. So Eric Hendricks was a captain last year, and he was a new addition linebacker, right, obviously. So Perryman being a captain wouldn't be a surprise. Has there been any indication of who the green dot player has been so far through camp?
I think it's been Perryman. At least he was it during the OTAs. I have not seen like specifically stated otherwise, but it was Denzel Perryman during OTAs.
Okay, that's fair enough. I think Perryman being the green dot guy, and now that he's the guy out there with experience, that's totally fine. I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Other pieces of news here. Gus Edwards apparently had an off-season surgery. Again, we did not know this until yesterday. So everybody's kind of wondering why isn't he practicing in OTAs? Why isn't he practicing? Well, apparently he had some kind of surgery. We don't know what the surgery was. We don't know how the recovery is going. He is participating in individual drills, but he is not participating in team drills thus far. I think it's an interesting kind of situation for him, because I think his contract is going to state that he should be the starter ahead of a 6th-round draft pick and a running back with $50,000 guaranteed money salary. But J.K. Dobbins looks good in camp, man. And we can talk about this, but he looks spry. He said he's fully healthy. And he also is getting the bulk of first-team reps as long as Gus Edwards is out. So interesting running back position room maybe became a little bit more interesting with the news of Gus Edwards' offseason surgery.
Yeah, as long as he's fine and will be fine for the season, I think it's kind of a blessing in disguise. I don't need to see more from Gus Edwards. I don't need to know. Yeah. I'm not going to learn more about Gus Edwards. He's not going to turn into a pass-catching running back or get faster. We know what Gus Edwards is and what he brings. So let's see what J.K. Dobbins has. They really need to see, can he hold up even in training camp in the preseason to be a guy they can count on in the regular season? What does he look like post multiple injuries? And if he looks great, shoot, man, like we're in for a pretty good offense, at least the rushing attack. And then, let me see Vidal. Let me see Jaret Patterson. Let me see Isaiah Spiller. I want to see more of those guys. So I don't need to see Gus Edwards out there in non-padded practices running with the ones. Like I know who he is. Let's see from the other guys, and he knows the offense too. So let's see Dobbins. Let's see these guys out there.
Yeah, you mentioned the other guys. So Greg Roman spoke today to the media, and he said that Edwards and Dobbins are like the very clear-cut 1 and 2.
Yeah.
It might be a 1A, 1B situation if Dobbins is fully healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But those two guys, it sounds like they're going to get the bulk of the work, bulk of the carries. Raise your hand if you had Jaret Patterson getting first-team reps over Kamani Vidal and Isaiah Spiller, because I sure did not. Very interesting move from this team. And I don't want to overreact too much because a lot of training camp is like figuring out what guys can do or not. And the best way to figure out if a running back can play is put him with the first team offense and see what he can do with the first team offensive line, with Justin Herbert throwing him the football potentially. And that's what's happening with Jaret Patterson. So the former undrafted free agent from Buffalo, who I believe Jason Valier loved him coming out in our first draft class that we did that year.
Yeah.
But he's bounced around the league. He's kind of a journeyman. And he's getting first team reps right now. So I don't know what to make of that just now. But if that continues, that's certainly going to be a storyline if Kamani Vidal and Isaiah Spiller are behind him.
See, here's the thing. I'm going to say it probably doesn't mean much because it's just camp and it's non-padded. At the same time, I just retweeted the Luke Benson hype from one catch video. So, like, who am I to say that this doesn't mean anything? But I definitely didn't expect that. And in years previous, we saw, Eckler, Kelly, Spiller, Roundtree, whoever, they would get the bulk of almost the entire practice. And the UDFA, some of the other guys that weren't going to make the roster, they didn't get any touches. I mean, we went for, it felt like a week or 2 weeks without seeing Tyler Huseman and Elijah Dotson really touch the football until the preseason. So them rolling through Jaret Patterson, just seeing what he has, I think is really cool. And I think that it's good to showcase some of these guys to see what they have. I'm curious because it's not his first year with the Chargers. Like, did they know anything about him? Is somebody higher than on him than we think? I don't really remember much about him from college. I liked him. I thought he was mildly explosive, if that's even not an oxymoron. But I'm surprised he's getting these reps over the guys that they drafted.
Yeah, I don't think I would have been surprised if he were like getting special teams reps. I think that's been mostly his role in the NFL. But yeah, we'll have to certainly monitor that going forward. Again, this offense is pretty complex from a rushing standpoint. It could be just that, Vidal and Spiller both are kind of having a more difficult time getting up to the speed of things in that regard. And we just don't know. I think NFL teams in general are a little more hesitant to embrace rookie running backs these days because of like the adjustments to pass protection, scheme, things like that. This is a run scheme that we talked about on Monday. Like this could be, one of the more diverse run games in the league. And, Kamani Vidal coming from, I want to say primarily like outside zone run scheme, if I remember correctly, it could be a bit much for him to make this jump in pass protection. I don't necessarily have a concern for him, but that hasn't been a huge feather in Isaiah Spiller's cap. That's for sure. We've heard that from, the past few off seasons. So very interesting. We'll see how it goes. Pads is obviously the way for these running backs to make a name for themselves once they get into the preseason games. But if Jaret Patterson is consistently getting first team reps, like this is arguably like the biggest dark horse of all dark horses on the Chargers roster, potentially making a case for himself. So should be a lot of fun, man. As Jim Harbaugh has said, competitors welcome at every turn, every position. Yeah,
no doubt. There's Harbaugh will have his favorites, of course, but I don't will be the kind of out loud, rampant, leaked, to everyone favoritism that there was with the previous regime, where it was obvious from year one. People were kind of like, that's not a thing. And then it was a thing the whole time. I don't think that'll be the case here. I truly think the best guys will play regardless.
Yeah, and I think with this specific roster, like there's not a whole lot of allegiances here to, big time draft picks and former players who signed big money contracts. Like it truly is, outside of like 10 players, like anybody else can earn a spot, in my opinion. Yep. And if Jaret Patterson is the more reliable third down back, like that could be a way for him to, earn himself a role. And if they carry 4 running backs, our pre-training camp prediction roster will be wrong, but hey, like I'll take it. I'm welcoming any player who's going to raise their hand and earn a role like that.
Yeah, we only projected 3 running backs to make the roster, but if he turns out to be heck of a pass catcher, let's say, then that's an easy way for him to make the roster with the other 3 guys, or as the third guy. No, as the 4th guy. There will be either 3 or 4, but yeah, it could be a role for him.
I don't know if you saw the picture, but Frank Blakely tweeted out a picture of the running backs, and Gus Edwards looks like significantly bigger than the other guys. So that is definitely something that I'm sure is in the Chargers' head of just how big and physical Gus Edwards can be.
Yeah, especially when you put him next to Kamani Vidal, who's not a very big guy. So definitely by comparison. But then, yeah, the Chargers haven't had a true starting running back this big since Melvin Gordon. I don't even think Gordon was that heavy. I think Gus Edwards is at least heavier, but I could be wrong. But regardless, it's the biggest starting kind of running back that they've had in a good long while. And I hope he doesn't fumble.
Yeah, hopefully. Melvin Gordon coming out of Wisconsin was 207 pounds.
Okay, then Gus isn't by a lot.
Gus is 235. So, so probably the biggest back since Mike Tolbert. I saw Mike Tolbert highlights coming back across the TL a couple of weeks ago, and that was certainly a treat. But yeah, 235 is the biggest back they've had in quite some time.
I didn't realize there was that much of a difference. Yeah. What is Mike Tolbert? Isn't he 240? Yeah, 246.
Well, I never really believed that, but
I don't know.
He is a short guy, to be fair.
Yeah, watch him be my height. Yeah, big guy.
All right, last health thing, I guess here. Carson Barnhart has not been able to practice. The undrafted free agent offensive lineman from Michigan. We'll see how long that lasts and if we ever get any specific updates. But obviously, as a guy who's trying to make the roster, missing the start of training camp is certainly not ideal. And then a lot of people had questions about if Donald Parham was going to be practicing. He has been practicing, at least that I've seen. Looks like he's been a full participant so far. Yeah. Greg Roman said today specifically that they're hoping to get him more well-rounded in the run game. They want to be able to use their tight ends in a variety of ways, and whoever that third tight end is going to have to be able to at least be a capable blocker in the run game. And Parham has shown some flashes, but certainly had a down season last year in that regard.
Yeah, he's got the size, he's the athleticism. So sure, that works. Were there concerns about him not practicing? Oh, because of OTAs.
Yeah, because he didn't practice in OTAs. A lot of people were wondering if he was going to practice in training camp or not. And, there's always that concern, I guess, with Donald Parham.
Yeah. As far as Carson Barnhart, that's definitely a bummer. I'm hoping that opens up something for Willis Patrick. But to be completely honest, based on the way they're doing everything, are they going to keep 10 offensive linemen because they have the starting 5 and the next 5? And of course, you do that in training camp anyway. But everyone just feels so specifically placed at their spots. This guy's a left guard, this guy's a right tackle, this guy's a left tackle. I feel like you just keep 10, no?
Yeah, that's obviously something we've talked about. The second unit, the only thing that has changed is that Alex Leatherwood and Jamari will kind of flip-flop from time to time, which I think makes sense for both of them. Train them at tackle, train them at guard. But that's the only thing, so the Foster Srell has stayed at left tackle, Jordan McFadden at left guard, Brendan Hymas is the backup center. And there's been some pushback of us calling him a lock. He, again, to emphasize, he is the only other center option on the team. It is literally him. He is the only backup center. And people are like, well, Jim Harbaugh mentioned Jordan McFadden as the backup center. He's never played center, and he has not snapped any single time in practice. So anyways, the second unit, I think, is very flexible. I think there's a lot more depth there than we've been used to. And people who have attended practice have pointed out Jordan McFadden is lining up at tight end, at fullback, in motion. And I love that. I think it just adds another layer to the offense. And obviously Greg Roman had Patrick Ricard for years. And, not to say that McFadden is going to end up, catching a few passes or anything like that, because he's obviously never done that either. But man, if they can just get consistent, blocking from a variety of spots, it elevates things. And we were asking for this for years because the team never had a true blocking tight end. It's like, well, if you don't have a tight end, at least use a 6 offensive lineman. And now we're getting Jordan McFadden in motion as a fullback. I love it. I cannot wait to see that in person in pads as well. So definitely have to talk about Jordan McFadden.
Yeah, I love the flexibility that he provides in what I'm going to assume is the run game. Maybe he catches a pass, which is great. But should the Chargers, so like they have Will Dissly, and that's basically really truly it for true blocking tight ends. Hayden Hurst, not that guy, not as young anyway. Donald Parham could be that guy, not really that guy. Hopefully the UDFA tight ends could be that guy. We don't know for sure. Stone Smart, not that guy. So if something happens to Will Dissly, or you want something a bit different, to have McFadden to be that extra blocker instead of a tight end who's really not a blocker makes a ton of sense. So I'm glad they're finding ways to get him involved. I'm guessing if that's the case, then he's going to be active on game day as one of the guys that are active on game day. Yeah. Which maybe means like a Leatherwood or a Serrell wouldn't be, and that's a long ways from now. But no, I'm glad that they're looking at what he can do and they're working with that. It's one of the things that Kellen Moore thought of and tried that I thought was a really good idea, especially because you drafted him but couldn't quite get him in the starting lineup. So I'm glad they're going with that, and hopefully that pans out in some way. If he somehow turns into a Patrick Ricard, great. But I don't know if that'll quite line up.
Yeah, no, very different skill sets, but it is what it is. Our guy Thomas Martinez is pointing out in the chat that the Chargers worked out all UFL offensive lineman Zach Johnson today from the Birmingham Stallions. He worked out for the Browns last week as well. So interesting potential workout there as Carson Barnhart remains injured. That could indicate that this is a long-term thing for him, which would be unfortunate.
Yeah, that would definitely be unfortunate. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know anything about this guy, but the Birmingham Stallions are awesome. I think they're like 3-peat or 4-peat UFL champions or whatever. So yeah, might as well steal from the best.
I think a lot of former Chargers on that team as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Larry Roundtree, congratulations on your championship victory. And then Bobby Holly no longer on there. Yes, I did look that up. Yes, I do know. Yes, I still know the status of Bobby Holly.
Tyler and I are going to be like 55 years old messaging about Bobby Holly, what he did in training camp in 2020. So fun. All right, so let's get to our biggest storyline. We're 28 minutes here, so we talked a lot about a lot of different things, but I think the biggest storyline heading into training camp that at least fans were looking forward to seeing is what kind of would happen with the wide receiver room. And so far, we've seen some good performances from kind of each of them, have had some good moments, but a lot of Quentin Johnston talk over the last 2 days. He's had some big moments. Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert both really raved about him yesterday. So what are you making of the Quentin Johnston stock after 2 days of training camp?
Yes, I'll start with the Jim Harbaugh comments, and we'll see. We have a long way to go to learn more about Jim Harbaugh and how much his words like hold some weight. Is it just fluff? But this is the guy that in the OTAs or in the spring said Trey Pipkins is one of our 5 best guys. And we go, okay, yeah, maybe, but let's see a competition. And then he's the starter. So I'm not saying that Quentin Johnston's going to be a starter, but when he comes out and says that Quentin Johnston's one of their best guys, I think it means something. It's just a matter of finding a way to get him on the field. Again, like I don't even know that he's better or worse than like a DJ Chark, more just a role thing. But as far as the, yesterday goes and today goes for Quentin Johnston, it's really nice. I know that what he ran and like the routes that we've seen and I've heard that he caught routes on, I know they weren't like easy yak, whatever things, but I think part of last year was just, we were almost just begging for them to do anything to get Quentin Johnston's confidence up and raise his floor. And it seems like whatever happened in OTAs over the summer when he got stronger with Ben Herbert, and with those comments from Jim Harbaugh, it seems like maybe confidence could be there for him this time, whereas maybe it wasn't last year as a rookie, a lot of pressure, then making mistakes. So I'm hoping that he has a bit more confidence and that this regime is putting confidence in him. And Harbaugh has really taken the time, more than anybody, I feel like, to go to bat for that, for a certain player. Quentin Johnston, he's been very, very supportive of him. So one, I can see why so many players fight hard for him and play hard for him. But two, I just think it does nothing but good things for QJ. So I like that yesterday, the 3 routes that he caught, 2 out routes, 1 dig route. It wasn't just like a curl or a screen or something. Daniel Popper mentioned that he was sharper coming in and out of his breaks. That's great to hear. And yes, I know today Dean Leonard couldn't exactly go for a contested, bat the ball down or anything. QJ technically also couldn't like jump up and try to moss anybody. So there were comments about him not like high pointing or something. It's a little bit tricky to evaluate when they're not allowed to do things like that, but it's still good to see. I mean, for him to get vertical and on top of Dean Leonard, who runs a 4.3 940, that's good to see. So am I going to sit here and say, and boy, people on social media really thought I was just loving Quentin Johnston and saying he's the greatest thing ever. Am I going to sit here and say that he's now going to be a great player in his second year? No, but you have to mention these things now, and hopefully they stack along the way, and we can track the progress and progression of Quentin Johnston. Because if he turns out to be a really good player this year, we can look back at day one and these comments from Jim Harbaugh and say that's kind of where it all started. And then again, credit to Ben Herbert, who's obviously got everyone stronger, but I don't think there will be a player outside of the offensive line that benefits more from getting stronger and more physical than Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, that piece was kind of the missing piece that Jim Harbaugh alluded to. They love the speed, they love the vertical leap ability, they love the agility, but they wanted to get him stronger. And I think, the Quentin narratives within the fan base, I think, are very, black and white in that sense. And there's a lot of middle ground area here because yes, we can all acknowledge that Quentin Johnston had some drop issues last year. We can all acknowledge that it was a struggle rookie season for him. At the same time, we can also say that the team did not do him any favors with the way that they were using him. They put him into a role that he was very much not suited for, in a role that he never played in college. And so he's learning a new offense, adjusting to NFL speed, adjusting to NFL physicality, and also playing a role that he's never done in his life before. So I think this regime, I can't remember if it was Harbaugh specifically or Sanjay Lal, but one of them talked about having essentially a clean slate when it came to players in general on the team, but specifically with Quentin Johnston, and just saying like, we're going to treat him like he's brand new to us. We'll work with him. We're going to help him, correct things. We're going to help him get to his best potential. And I think hopefully use him the right way. So, a lot of people overreacted, I think, to the wide receiver 4 comments from Daniel Popper last week. And even though he's had a good couple of days, that part is still true. Like, he is the 4th receiver. The starting trio so far has been Ladd, Palmer, and DJ Chark. And Quentin's been, I think, the only receiver who has rotated in with the starters, but he is very clearly like wide receiver 4. And that's fine. I think it's a role that he can grow into. And if he is wide receiver 4, he still is going to play. He still is going to touch the football. He's still going to, get some targets here. But for me, it's the consistency aspect of things, because at this time last year, we heard about the flashes, we saw the videos, we saw the big plays, but then like the next day he would have like 2 or 3 drops and, just would not look super locked in. And we would have these conversations with the reporters, and we were there. But for him to have 2 good days in a row, hopefully he can just continue to stack up these positive days and just be more consistent. I don't need Quentin to drastically become like the wide receiver 1 on this team for me to feel good about his development. As long as there is development, and then next year more development, then I'm cool with that. I mean, obviously, a lot of fans are going to be disappointed if he doesn't have 800,000 yards or whatever, right? But if there's just more consistency, more attention to detail, improvement, like real improvement on tape, that's really what I'm looking for. I'm not trying to put specific statistical expectations on him right now.
No, the development is definitely key. And what I'm looking for this year, it's not his year 1, not his rookie season, but in a year where you're not really given a ton of help, I feel like, from your coordinator and in your role, I think that this is kind of like a debut season for him. He got some good work in last year. I really do. Look, he didn't have a good year last year. He was disappointing for a 1st-round pick. He'd be disappointing probably for a 2nd-round pick, especially considering how much he had to play. But I really just do not like the discourse around him. Like, so much hatred so early on for this player. Like, I hope we can see that I hope we could be completely wrong. The next 3 weeks he stinks. I have no idea. But so far, I hope we can appreciate what seems to be the time he put in. Dennis pointing out that he trained with Marvin Harrison Jr. this offseason. Like, he's trying. He's putting in the work, and he's trying to get better. Harbaugh says that he got stronger, really worked with Ben Herbert. Herbert really focused in on him. So I can at least appreciate he is trying. It's not for lack of effort. So hopefully he can get better from there. I'm rooting for him. But yes, I can also acknowledge he had a bad season last year.
Yeah. All of those things can be true. So,
yep.
So far, so good. And I would love to see this continue. People online nitpicking like his catch against Dean Leonard today. Like, yeah, it wasn't like an awesome catch. And Dean obviously pulled up a bit here, but there were multiple catches yesterday on video where he's snatching the ball with his hands, really good technique. So it's a work in progress. And that's kind of always been my expectation for Quentin Johnston. And yeah, like it was a disappointing rookie season, but I wasn't ever really expecting him to have 1,000-yard rookie season either, like we kind of talked about last season. So
no.
Right now he's wide receiver 4. He can still bring a lot of value to this team. And if somebody gets injured, maybe he's able to capitalize on a bigger role. And if he is, great. But I think just the consistency of things, attacking the ball, as Frank points out, being able to run routes cleaner. And that was a real issue for him last year. And we've already heard from other reporters that's been an improvement so far.
Yeah. And again, we don't quite know how that catch plays out in real time in pads against the Raiders in week 1 or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not catching it. Sure, he didn't put up his hands. He caught it here. What's worse? It's just not catching it. I know that seems like a very duh thing, but at least he didn't drop it. And maybe the bar is really low, but at least he caught a touchdown. Like he caught a touchdown. And we can nitpick it all we want. He didn't catch a touchdown on Dean Leonard.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, Keenan and Mike Williams were body catchers forever. And at the end of the day, what matters is you catch the football. And if you catch it, you catch it. I don't really care how it looks. In terms of the other wide receiver news, it does seem like Josh Palmer is old reliable, if you will. Yep. I loved that Justin Herbert was talking about how he can play each of the 3 spots. And, we love Josh Palmer on this show. I think the film has backed up our opinion of him, and the numbers from last year in particular were great. He set a new career high in yards per reception last year. And it's always been the injuries thing. And I thought Jim Harbaugh, when he was asked about Josh Palmer yesterday, instead of pointing out like what he's been practicing and like how they feel about him, I thought it was pretty telling of like the impact of Ben Herbert and this training staff and everything like that, when Jim Harbaugh said Palmer has had a great offseason with our training staff. Like that's where he wanted to go first. And I think that was kind of an indication that Palmer did have some health things to clean up, and hopefully this staff is able to get him to a place where he can stay on the field at all times, because to me, he is the wide receiver 1 on this team. He's so reliable. He can get open. He can create separation. He can beat zone. He can beat you deep. And the team needs that. And I think Justin Herbert needs that. So to hear Harbaugh talk about his health and how much work he's put in the offseason, I think was a good indication that Palmer at least is on a right track when it comes to a health standpoint.
Yeah, that's definitely great to hear. Last year, it was either the Jets or the Bears, but he basically hobbled back onto the field.
Bears game, yeah.
Because he didn't want to come off the field. And he posted as much, like, you're not taking me, you're going to have to drag me off of the field. Which is a sentiment I think J.K. Dobbins had today too. And it's good to hear that he's worked through that. It's definitely a contract year for him. So I think everything is just aligning at the right time for him to have a very, very strong season. I don't expect it to be Justin Jefferson's season, but it should be his best season. And I'm rooting for him. He's had to be the other guy, the third guy, I need to be Keenan Allen today and Mike Williams tomorrow because these guys are out. He's never just been Josh Palmer, wide receiver 1, or maybe even wide receiver 2, but at least he gets to be Josh Palmer. So whatever that looks like, I hope it's awesome. And just to hear that, again, Josh Palmer is no fast, explosive, downfield, quick twitch, whatever receiver. He's just reliable, a very good wide receiver 2 who can occasionally pop, a wide receiver 1 day against the Chiefs or something. So to see him just be a nice, consistent presence, that's great. Like, I'm not saying he's the same guy because they're different players, but if he's just Malcolm Floyd for the Chargers, that's sick. Like, I'm down for a nice, 600 to 800 yard kind of receiver who's always reliable for you.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people have just said like, oh, like the Chargers are just going to let him walk. We don't know that. Like if he has the season that you and I certainly think that
Yeah.
he can have, the Chargers are going to have every reason to bring him in. Like they're going to need wide receiver help, and if Palmer can, assert himself and say, I am capable enough to be maybe not wide receiver 1 on this team, but wide receiver 2, that's an easy decision for this Chargers regime as they kind of pivot into year 2 of really having the Joe Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh, resources. And if they could just surefire have this guy here, let's bring him back. Like they did the same thing with Alohi Gilman. I don't think there's any reason to think why we are already writing him off as a non-Charger player next year. I think if he has a healthy and productive season like we expect, I think he's back on the team next year. And he's just the perfect kind of Harbaugh Roman receiver. He's going to do the dirty work. He's going to play all 3 spots. Like he's not afraid to block. He's not afraid to go over the middle. He's not afraid to go deep. I think his identity as a wide receiver fits perfectly with this team. So I don't want to get ahead of myself, obviously, but if he plays like he's going to play, I would expect him to be back next year.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be opposed. They can definitely afford him. Do you go out and spend? Because I'm guessing their first, honestly, 3 of their 4 first picks are defense next year, barring Pastor B elsewhere. Yeah. So do you go out and spend big money on another receiver? Do you make your receiver core next year Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, and a 2nd-round pick or something? If Palmer comes out and has 1,000 yards, you have to keep him. And honestly, he's not going to be that expensive. Again, you could go find your $30 million a year receiver, but if Palmer clocks in at 15 to 20, what did Christian Kirk get? Something like that.
It was like 18.
Jesus Christ. Wow, he did? Okay, well, if you can come under 20 million, then go for it. I think that's totally worth it.
I mean, you're like 1,000-yard season would probably put Palmer into that kind of range, right? But, Darnell Mooney, Gabriel Davis, they just got $13 million per year. Brandon Cooks is at $10 million per year. It's like that's the kind of range where I think you're paying for that kind of player. If he has 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns, then maybe you're having a different kind of discussion. But I think he's going to be affordable enough, and I think he himself would be incentivized to stay with the Chargers and stay with Justin Herbert and stay in the offense that just gave him his first 1,000-yard season. So, that's again a lot of questions for next offseason, but I think a lot of people are prematurely writing him off as he's not going to be on the team next year. We don't know that. Like, I think if he has a great season, then I think all parties would be incentivized to bring him back.
Have the Ravens, and again, I know Joe Ortiz was not the GM, but did the Ravens have a receiver produce 1,000-ish yards and then let that receiver walk? I feel like they've always kind of I think Bateman had over 1,000 yards, but that was a 1st-round draft pick from them, who I think is still on the team. Yeah, he's still on the team.
He is, yes. And they just paid him also. So, Palmer could be on that kind of trajectory, although Bateman was a 1st-round draft pick.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
They did trade Hollywood Brown, so there is that. But I have to go through some things. Their wide receiver history was not the strongest in Baltimore. No. So it was a lot of like paying veterans, and that's kind of their thing in general. Where like, everybody kind of labels them draft and develop, but then they'll go sign Steve Smith, they'll go sign Jadeveon Clowney, and like those are the guys who are kind of potential standouts. So again, we'll see what happens. Getting ahead of ourselves there. For those asking about Ladd McConkey, I think he had a better day today, at least production wise, but haven't heard too much. But I'm definitely excited to get in person, see what he's like as a route runner. I think both of us have really high expectations for Ladd McConkey, but haven't heard too much from him just yet.
Nah, it feels like he's had a couple catches here and there. Some people in the chat have said that he looks really crisp and really sharp. Just either haven't gone to him or we're just not hearing about it. I don't know. So, but no news isn't bad news. We're not hearing bad news. We're not hearing drops. We're not hearing injuries. So we're just hearing, some production here and there, and that's fine.
Yeah, and a lot of the first 2 days of training camp, it's a lot of scripted looks. So you're maybe not. It might just not be that they've called his number so far, but he's working with the first team offense. He's definitely going to be a starter for this team. And I think we both expect some good things this season.
Mm-hmm.
All right, before we get to the defensive side of things and keep going here, of course, have to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. It is the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports, and there are over 5 million active users on Prize Picks. It's growing tremendously. They just increased their potential, their earning potential. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks. With as little as 4 correct picks, you could turn $10 into $1,000. There is a great opportunity coming up here as the USA men's basketball team is over in Paris this summer. If LeBron James scores 1 point when Team USA is playing, you can win up to $100. So it is a great bonus that Prize Picks has going while Team USA is over in Paris. LeBron James is the best player on the Olympic basketball team at age 39. You can hate him all you want. The dude is incredible. I've never seen this kind of longevity in my entire life. 1 point is nothing. So it is seriously free money over at Prize Picks. They had a special like this for Caitlin Clark for a bit while she kind of debuted as well. So Prize Picks is great because they have just ways for anybody to have a chance at increasing their earnings, winning free money. And LeBron James scoring 1 point while Team USA is playing in Paris is certainly an easy decision for me.
Yeah, use that one and you can mix and match NBA, NFL, whatever. Like it doesn't just have to be one sport, one game, whatever. So mix and match, take that and put it with, all the Patrick Mahomes unders you can and have a ball.
Yeah, unless he's playing the Raiders. If Patrick Mahomes is playing the Raiders, you hit that more button. I don't know if I would be having a Kermit doll dressed as Patrick Mahomes if I were the Las Vegas Raiders. That is for damn sure.
No, I mean, I get the sense, the Raiders are the bad guys. It definitely feels like a Raiders of old thing. I get what they're going for. That's a horrible thing to do. And the weird thing is the Raiders have beaten the Chiefs several times over the last couple of years. They've beaten the Chiefs more than the Chargers have, or at least as many times as they have. And certainly I have less expectations for them, but yeah, I would not have done that. Go put, I don't know, anybody else, literally anybody else. But they went Patrick Mahomes. So good luck.
Patrick Mahomes in 12 career games against the Raiders has thrown 30 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. I would not poke the bear if I were the Las Vegas Raiders.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm going to ask my dad how he feels about that one. I'm sure he's going to hate it. Yes, I guess Frank says Pop-Tarts aren't a big deal after all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Devontae Adams does not want the Chargers going after him because he schools them. Yeah, I wouldn't go after Mahomes because he's been pretty good. I've sat with my dad through many games and they've been very awful to watch.
Yeah. Anyways, that's to say, check out prizepicks.com/guilty for a deposit match up to $100. Again, super easy to use. Definitely encourage you guys to do that. And it does help continue to grow the show. All right, Tyler, let's get to the defensive side of things here. I definitely want to touch on the secondary. Where would you like to start with that group? Because I think there's a bunch of interesting stuff that we could touch on to start off.
Yeah. I think some of the safety group rotation has been started to be sorted out. So obviously there's a clear starters in Alohi Gilman, Derwin James, fine. But AJ Finley seems to have that third safety spot locked down, which again, we had speculated he's the third safest safety on the team in terms of roster, but we weren't sure if he'd be the third guy on the field. So far, he's been the third guy on the field. Today, JT Woods rotated in a bit as well with the first team, but otherwise it's mostly been AJ Finley. So again, your two main starters, AJ Finley seems to be the third guy. Woods is now rotating in, which means Tony Jeferson has been the third string safety the second day in a row. And Daniel Popper said as much. So, I didn't think Jeferson would be the third safety, but I guess fifth safety kind of makes sense based on where we sort of have been thinking he'd be. We were less sold on the Tony Jeferson thing. We didn't say it was like a genius move by Joe Ortiz. It might be, but he's right now safety 5. So we'll see if they even keep 5 safeties. We'll see if the other UDFAs can make a push for the roster. But so far that's an interesting way things are shaking out.
Yeah, I think specifically with Tony Jeferson, I'm curious how that changes because Jim Harbaugh has mentioned several times like they want to be like a plane taking off. They want to kind of have like a ramp up, and then they want to be able to like get up to 10,000 feet, as he was saying to Derwin James in his mic'd up. Maybe this is their way of easing Tony Jefferson into things and just saying, hey, like we're going to give you 10 to 15 reps of practice as you kind of get back into football shape. Derwin James did mention that he feels like him, Alohi, and Tony are definitely the leaders of the safety room. So we'll see what happens there. I think, there were some people who disagreed with our take that AJ Finley was like the safest safety after that, but so far that has been, come to fruition. So we know what he can do from a special team standpoint. I think they're trying to figure out who can be a reliable, potential starting safety out of AJ Finley and JT Woods. And then if they can't, they'll be like, okay, well, now we know that we have Tony Jefferson. So he's kind of almost like a backstop, if you will. So we'll have to see how that continues or not. But this could just be kind of them ramping him up, getting him back into football shape so far.
Yeah, curious to see what they even prefer. Maybe they don't have a real preference for who the starter is. Maybe the first game against the Raiders, they're playing a lot of Bowers and Mayer. They go with an AJ Finley. With a different team, they go with JT Woods. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, Tony Jefferson, 75 so far. We'll see.
Yeah, I did like Derwin's comments as well about his potential role in this defense. Not to bring up old demons and everything like that, but just Brandon Staley had Derwin James playing like 8 different spots, and it was like so cool. Like I loved watching it on tape. Like you never knew where Derwin James was going to be, and he was generally pretty good at every spot that they put him in. But at least so far, he's really only playing safety, and he's playing in the slot. He's doing 2 things instead of 8, and he says that is felt more natural to him. It's felt simpler. He's able to just focus in and not think as much and not have to cover up so many different areas. And I think so far it's been, a good thing for him to just kind of scale back a little bit and have them take some stuff off his plate. I mentioned the Albert Breer article, and we can talk about some of the other stuff from there, but Albert Breer has talked about Jim Harbaugh empowers his star players by not asking them to always be Superman. And it's a very different approach than what we're used to over the last 3 years, where Justin Herbert, Derwin James, Khalil Mack, you guys have to be Superman and carry so much pressure for us. Well, now Derwin doesn't have to do that. And I think it's going to bring out a more efficient and fresher, more excited version of Derwin James. And I think he kind of alluded to that yesterday as well.
Yeah, I mean, Daiyan Henley came out and said that we would like to not confuse ourselves. We'd like to confuse the opposing offense rather than the guys playing defense. And yeah, Derwin James has gotten a lot of flack. I get the intention of what they tried to do with Derwin James, especially after his rookie year and what he was able to do. Like, yeah, that guy can do everything. And in theory, Derwin James can do everything. But I don't know if he can do everything well all the time. And that's a lot to ask. That's a very rare thing. And Derwin James is kind of a rare body type and physical prototype and et cetera. But it clearly did not work in the end. So him having very, very solid foundation, safety role, slot corner, the big slot, whatever they call him, great. I think that's a really solid start for him. And, I hope the other players can rise to the occasion. But if not, the defense is kind of taking its lumps this year. I'd rather Derwin get nice and comfortable and be a foundational piece because they're paying him for a while. So I hope he just becomes a nice foundational piece for them, and then they can start building around him again.
Yeah, I think, build around him is the right way to say that, because I think you would watch him go from deep safety to linebacker to the slot to rushing off of the edge. And that not only creates a lot of pressure on Derwin, it creates a lot of pressure on everybody else to be ready to step up in the roles that maybe they're not accustomed to doing. So I think in general, the goal for the secondary for this training camp is just establish a lot of confidence, build positive habits, build competition, but be simple and allow them to play fast and physical and aggressive to a certain extent, like Jim Harbaugh talking about with the tempo violations and things like that. But just let them be free, let them get after it. And I think that just will kind of embolden this secondary to play a little bit better than we might think, because I think we certainly have some concerns about just overall the baseline level that this secondary can bring.
Yeah, we didn't hear anything today, but it sounds like it's so far working for Cam Hart. We were both high on him. You were much higher on him, but we definitely liked him more than PFF's 140th spot on the draft board or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Unless they knew about his shoulders, which maybe that could be the case. But otherwise, like we never really quite got that. So to see him yesterday come up with a nice interception on, I believe, Easton Stick in front of Jalen Johnson, the undrafted free agent wide receiver, is that in front of McConkey and Herbert throwing? No, but it's good to see. And I just think he's such a unique type. I'm really curious to see if he can push Fulton at all for a starting job.
Yeah, it sounds like Chris Rim and Eric Smith have both kind of, solidified that Asante is kind of safe in terms of the starting lineup, but it does, I think he should be as well. But it does sound like, there's at least a chance that one of these other guys could push Christian Fulton, who's having himself a good training camp so far as well. It sounds like, the secondary is playing well, and that's not unusual. The training camp structure generally does favor the cornerbacks and the secondary to make plays on the football early on in training camp. But if Cam Hart can string together these kind of practices where he's, playing really well, and then you give him more opportunities against the starters and you just consistently see his name pop up, I mean, it's definitely a positive thing. I was, like you said, much higher than almost anybody else on the planet, maybe outside of Notre Dame and Baltimore, on Cam Hart. But it just, I think, creates more depth. And if he can really kind of raise his hand here, it would just help this team so much.
So I was looking up something for a completely different question as you were talking about that. But yeah, I would like to see him. We did feel like he was kind of one of the steals, and only because of a shoulder injury or multiple shoulder injuries.
Multiple surgery. He had multiple shoulder surgeries. Yes.
Gotcha. So
according
hopefully,
to Dane Brugler.
Yeah, I would like to see him push Fulton. And if Fulton wins, awesome. Then he's totally won it and deserves it. Great. But I'd like to see him push him.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Let's get to some other rotational things here. Jim Harbaugh did mention Scott Matlock as a potential leader, and so far he is a starting defensive tackle. Daniel Popper pointing out that the 4 defensive linemen that have rotated in with the starting unit so far, obviously Poona Ford, Morgan Fox, Scott Matlock, and then Christopher Hinton was the 4th there. So no mention of Otito Ogbonia, no mention of Justin Eboigbe. And for what it's worth, Scott Matlock was specifically mentioned as the first starter both days, according to Daniel Popper. So thoughts about the defensive line rotation so far, Tyler?
A bit of a surprise, to be completely honest. I didn't check their exact rotation today, but it seems like they were doing pairs of Poona Ford, Matlock, and then Fox and Hinton. Hinton was kind of interesting, so we'll see if that materializes in anything. But yeah, Matlock, I guess the good news is after we watched him, all the stuff he did at Boise State, we were pretty excited for him and saw what he could do. In the preseason, during the regular season, there really wasn't much there. And actually his statistics were worse than I remembered. I feel like I remember more. Maybe it was some training camp practice stuff, but the stats definitely weren't great. The film definitely wasn't great. He didn't quite pop as much as some other guys, but they're very high on him. So I'm fascinated to see what they think of him. I can't imagine he starts ahead of Morgan Fox, but if you're looking for a bigger body, everyone else is bigger than Morgan Fox. So if Fox is no longer, if he doesn't have a shot to be an early down guy, and they'd rather go with Matlock there, I get it. But again, I wish Morgan Fox were taken off the field so often.
Yeah, me too. I understand why they'd be a little bit more concerned about having him as an every down player, but as long as he keeps his pass rush snaps high, I'm fine if he's not playing run defense. Like that's overall fine with me. But having Matlock be that guy over Hinton, Eboigbe, Ogbonia, I think honestly should be viewed as a surprise. I don't think his film from last season backs that up. But the athletic profile is there. He's apparently established himself as a leader. Maybe Ben Herbert can get him, stepping in the right direction physically. And this defensive line coach clearly believes in his potential. So, like I mentioned earlier, I'm cool with it. Like I don't care about my draft priors here. I did not watch Scott Matlock from Boise State. I did not grade him. Otito Ogbonia is obviously coming off of his injury, but I am surprised that Eboigbe has not been given at least kind of a rotation with the first team defense, given how they viewed him as a second round player. And then there was some health issues, but I guess that again, that could change. It's only the first 2 days, but having Matlock be like the unquestioned starter, again was not on my bingo card so far.
Yeah, to my understanding, with now again different regimes, they tend to like to flip things about halfway through training camp. So if you haven't been getting the first team reps, sometimes that can flip unless you're an obvious, first team kind of guy. So maybe that's when things change for Eboigbe,
Sure.
As a day 3 pick, as the rookie. Maybe you give some, put the veterans out first, but Matlock isn't exactly like an 8-year veteran out there either, nor was he much of a starter last year. So again, yeah, bit of a surprise there. I think between the two, Eboigbe definitely has the ceiling and the power. But hey, if Matlock's done something well and he's a leader for them and he's earned it, cool.
Yeah, the defensive line I think is outside of Puno Ford and Morgan Fox's pass rush role. Like whoever wants to come see snaps, like let's get it. Like I don't really care. Like any of you guys could play. If they view that Matlock is the best option there, I'll wait and see and pass judgment as the tape comes on throughout the season.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Tyler, any other thoughts about anything we've heard so far in the first 2 days?
Not that I could think of. I think we've covered most everything. We'll see what changes in another 2 days. Everything can be completely different. But for now, good start, good health so far. So can't ask for much more.
Yeah. I guess, we don't talk a ton about Justin Herbert and these kind of things, but yeah, it sounds like Justin Herbert is playing awesome. I mentioned the Albert Breer article. Apparently the Chargers are just like enamored with his ability as a runner for what it's worth. The quote specifically was that his ability to pull away from defenders with his speed was eye-opening. They were blown away by his athletic traits. So we're very curious about how Justin Herbert as a runner is going to factor into this offense or not. And I think I've kind of just assumed that like Justin Herbert doesn't like to run very much. So the answer is going to be not. But it sounds like so far this team is like, all right, maybe we can build some things out with this quarterback as a runner. Not nearly the 125 carries that he gave Lamar Jackson every single year, but maybe it's 65 instead of 45. Then that could be a possibility.
Yeah, it's such a tough one to balance. Do we let the quarterback go out there and risk injury at the same time? And as fans have pointed out, he's never been injured. Well, actually, I lie. He was injured after an interception because someone stepped on him.
Yeah,
but as a runner,
his finger got in Crosby's helmet. That was the first finger injury.
Oh, I don't know why I thought he got stepped on. Anyway, it's never been as a runner with the football, and I can't imagine what it's like to watch him on film and then actually just see him in person running. He's just an enormous human being. For him to run that fast is awesome. So how much will they use him in that role? I don't know. I think Alex Smith was about like 40 to 50 or like 45 to 55 rushes. Herbert's a little bigger than Alex Smith, I would imagine, but I don't want Herbert to get hurt in any capacity.
Yeah, I definitely bigger than Alex Smith. Alex was probably 6'3", 210, I would say. If I had to guess right now, and Justin is 6'6", and right now he looks like he's like 250 pounds. I mean, the guy looks completely jacked out of his mind. So
yeah, he does.
I don't know if anybody else has been feeling like that way, but maybe it's just the gold jersey is nice and tight. But he definitely looks like he's put on some weight this offseason.
Dang, Alex Smith, 6'4", 217.
That's pretty close.
Bigger than I would have thought, honestly.
Yeah. So I would be curious how much Justin has fluctuated his weight. Obviously, you list them at one thing, but he looks a lot thicker this year than he did last year.
Yeah, I took a great screenshot of just his random back lat sort of pose. He was trying to sign, but he had did a full lat Sam Stewart lat spread. Yeah. And I was like, holy moly. Yeah. We do it every year. We at the rate we think Herbert is going, he's going to be enormous by his 10th year. He's probably been relatively the same. He's just a very naturally gifted guy.
Yeah. And it's funny, everybody always is shocked at how tall he is. Isaiah Likely was in the NFL Top 100 feature about him. He's like, yeah, I thought he was my height. Isaiah Likely's 6'2". And he's like,
Yeah.
turns out he's just like ginormous. So the size of Justin Herbert definitely, pops more once you're in person, I feel like.
Yeah. And again, we see pictures of Donald Parham out there, and it's like, holy moly. There's tall, and then there's Donald Parham.
Yeah. That guy, I still think he's under listed on his height, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Appreciate everybody for tuning in to our first recap of the training camp practices 1 and 2. Again, like I mentioned, Alex is going to be at training camp practice tomorrow and posting a video about his time there. And then the 2 of us will be at practice on Saturday. We'll post a video then, and then we'll be at all 3 of us at practice on Monday. We'll see about that specific video, but we'll have obviously stuff covered that weekend. All right, guys, appreciate it so much for tuning in. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment. All that stuff does continue to help grow the show. Appreciate Tyler. Appreciate all of you guys. That's going to do it for us. Bolt up.